Now we're going to shift to another area that's become of greater focus to us over the past few years, and that's dealing with your health care. Typically, when we create a trust for a client, we're all thinking in the mindset of what do we do about the assets? But we're concerned about not just your financial well-being, we're concerned about your physical and emotional well-being. So healthcare documents, healthcare planning, healthcare considerations have become far more important than they were even a few years ago. People are living to an older and older age. All kinds of afflictions are being exposed, and we're dealing with those compared to, 40, 50 years ago. Both my grandfathers died of a heart attack, just like that. Bypass surgery would have extended their life expectancy 10, 20 years, who knows. So let's talk about the healthcare issues. Stacy and Kathy, and what do you see going on? Or Tracy and Stacy.
That's okay.
Tracy and Stacy.
I'll start first of all with adult children. People don't realize, your child is your child is your child. Because I do what I do for a living, I knew that when my kids turned 18, I no longer had the legal authority to make healthcare decisions for them. I have a set of healthcare documents for both of for my 22 and my 27-year-old son. And you don't really think about that until you run across a situation in which it's a real issue. So you guys, if you've got grandkids that are college age, talk to your kids. Make sure that they have a set of healthcare documents for them. Because if they have a car accident, legally they don't have the authority to do anything for them. It's kind of up to the doctors. In the same sense, if you guys take your grandkids on a trip or on a vacation, don't do it without taking a set of healthcare documents for them. Because if something happens to them, if you're on the Disney cruise and somebody breaks an arm or gets sick, you're liable to have a little bit of an issue. And so it's always be safe rather than sorry. There's also issues, of course, if you have children with disabilities, and I'll kind of let Tracy touch on that, but just be, aware of those kind of things.
Before we go to disability, I will say also, some of you may still have parents that are living who may not have health care documents in place. And so it's a good time to be thinking of that right now and getting those documents in place if they're still able and competent to execute their own documents. And if not, you might think about guardianship proceedings ahead of time and before you're up against the wall needing them. So I just wanted to throw that out there, but then, like Stacey.
Let me interject one thing, because she hit it perfectly. Just before I walked in here this evening, I received an email from a young lady who said, Mom's 80 years old, we're trying to put her into a long-term care facility. The administrator says Dad can't do that if he's not her agent under her power of attorney. You need to get a power of attorney. She said Mom's in the aggressive stage of dementia, and we're not sure, number one, she's competent, number two, that she would even agree to appoint Dad as her agent. What do we do? And we may be looking at a guardianship for her, and my email response back was call us right away, but Dad's still competent. Let's get the documents in place to take care of him. And we may be looking at a guardianship for her. You need to come in for an appointment. But this is really timely because I just got that email like 15 minutes before I walked in here.
Tracy, other thoughts?
Yes, I think Mrs. Burris has a question.
Sorry.
Oh,
That's okay.
Actually, comment. I had power of attorney for my mother, and it works very well. But when she died, it died.
Yeah.
Always.
So you have to make sure you get paperwork done ahead of time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially if you know that death is imminent, because the power of attorney dies with the person.
Oh,
who's correct.
absolutely.
Everyone clear on that? Your power of attorney is effective only as long as you live. When you die, that goes away.
They can't use
Then
it
all
to
the
fix
power is transferred to either your trust or your will.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll just say one thing real quick about either if any of you have disabled children, disabled grandchildren, or maybe even a disabled spouse. if they are legally competent, I mean, they may be receiving some sort of disability and they may be legally disabled, but they may still be mentally competent to execute their own documents. If that's the case, we want to encourage them to execute those documents if they're 18 or over. If they're not, and say you have a grandchild that's 18 or under, is not mentally competent to make healthcare decisions when they reach the age of 18, then it's another time when we start thinking about guardianship proceedings ahead of time so that we can get the ball rolling. And I know most of you probably have kids that are older than 18. I just wanted to mention that. And it's the same thing with a spouse. Make sure that that spouse has documents, healthcare documents in place before they get to the point that they can't execute their own healthcare documents. And if you're already to that point, then come see us and let's look at guardianship proceedings.
We had a situation up in Enid. Do y'all remember the big ice storm back in January of '03? We had a husband who was injured in a nursing home during the ice storm, and they had to rush him to the hospital. And his wife followed along behind. And when she got to the hospital, the doctors said, "Do you have a healthcare power of attorney?" And she said no, and they said, "We can't talk to you." And they shut the door. And she said, "But he needs help." And they said, "Well, when he regains consciousness, we'll do what we need to try to protect him until he regains consciousness, because he has to consent unless you go to court and get appointed as his guardian." So husband and wife can be an issue. Children, definitely an issue. And last thing, we had a Boy Scout troop that went up to Lake of the Ozarks on a Boy Scout expedition up there. A 17-year-old boy was injured. They took him to the hospital, and the doctor said, "Who has legal authority to consent to treatment?" Well, guess what? Nobody. They had to call down here, find the parents, they had to get documents, they had to go to some place where they could fax the documents, and it was 3 hours before they could treat this broken arm and take care of the problem. So don't, I've got my grandkids all the time. I always have legal documents in my possession that says I can do what I need to. So just be aware that that's important, no matter what the relationship is.